to set up. So let's do tonight's talk. So for tonight, since it was a new year, I thought I'd take that as our theme. I was thinking about it, and since I had a little time off to think, I wanted to reflect a little bit on the last year and the things that I'd seen and kind of where it felt like we were. So that's what I have set up for tonight. So as we're starting 2022, I think one feeling dominates probably for everybody, and that's vulnerability. Just feeling really vulnerable to the world and the different things that can happen. Omicron, as we were just talking about, is taking off and it's highly contagious. I just ended last semester, so happy to finally taken off the masks and be able to talk to some people, and for this second time I've got to put them back on. Right, we're going to go right back into this. Socializing with people poses a risk. The risks are a little bit different, but it really, now as we're coming through this next wave, just reminds us how little control we have. It seems that Omicron evolved within a single person somewhere in South Africa, someone who's immune compromised. And so it just has us wondering, like, what else is out there evolving? Where else can it be? It's reminding us how vulnerable we are. As we come up on January 6th, an anniversary since there was an insurrection in our capital, a concentrated effort to overthrow the election, in many cases fully conscious that that's what they were doing, the thinnest of justifications for it. No one has been held accountable. It's not clear how much that's going to happen. It's creating a lot of sense of political chaos, that we don't know what's going to happen with the political system, that judicial decisions and processes that at least had been reliable, even if they haven't always been fair or just, at least were sort of predictable, are in chaos now. We don't know what might happen. We're vulnerable to all of that. I've been watching both here and at my workplace and at other workplaces, you know, people that I know, even people on NPR that I've been listening to. The Great Resignation is in force. People are quitting their jobs. They've done it for years. They're dropping out. They're saying that they're done. They're leaving careers that they had been involved in. We're seeing a lot of people do this. I would have expected that at the beginning, perhaps, of the pandemic, but we're seeing a bunch of them here as we're looking towards the tail end as we go into yet another year of it. At the same time, reports have come out about how quickly people are leaving religious institutions, communities that had been core to lots of areas, lots of people's identities, lots of who they are. They're disconnecting. So yeah, people are leaving communities that they don't want to be connected with anymore. They're leaving behind people they've been attached to, people that feel like they are part of them. The pandemic, or due to the pandemic, we tore a lot of things down. A lot of things got damaged or destroyed. Some of it we wanted. I think some of it was better, but some of it we did not. But either way, we've really become aware of how easily everything can be torn down, about how easily everything can change. And things cannot be taken for granted. So one of the first challenges in our life is to face our vulnerability squarely, to take a look at our vulnerability, to actually see it. And I think we often try to look away. A lot of times I think we try to hide in determinism or providence. That is, we try to hide by saying everything's working for the best. We know everything's going to work out. It'll be fine. It'll all be great. And we don't necessarily know that. For many people that have caught COVID, that have ended up in the hospital, that have died, it didn't all work out. It didn't all work out for the best. In terms of the political chaos that we're seeing, it's easy to see the similarities to what happened in Italy with the fascists and in Germany with the fascists. And we want to say, well, it all worked out, or it might, but boy, those are dark years that you're talking about in between there. Can it happen here? It could. How likely is it? I have no idea. But again, we have to look clearly at these possibilities to say that it can happen. Oftentimes, then we might resort to determinism, right? If Providence isn't going to do it, if we're not saying it's all working out for the best, maybe we try to hide it by simply saying, well, we can't control it. We can't do anything about it. It's just the way that it is, right? We can't create the outcomes that we want. And then there's a sort of resignation, right? Hiding in that kind of determinism. I think we hide from our vulnerability in another way, hiding with the routines, right? Just focusing on the daily tasks. We just get one thing done after another, one foot going after another. We're sort of zombies in this case, right? Going through life, again, without really choosing, without really grasping, without really understanding or accepting or understanding really and choosing what it is that we're doing each day. We just do one thing after another, one thing separate. So I think we don't face our vulnerability very much, even though that is the one thing that's become really clear. So what's our option? What could we do about this? A phrase comes to mind. Nietzsche's most famous for saying this, although Jean-Jacques Rousseau said it, and the Stoics added it before it. He said, amor fati, love your fate, right, is the claim that we should do. You need to love your fate. It's a strange injunction. It's a strange thing to tell somebody to do, because it's not just saying you need to accept what's happened or just let it be. You're being told to love it, right? You're supposed to embrace it. You're supposed to say yes. Nietzsche wants to say, I'm a yes sayer, right, to every single thing. His New Year's resolution, right, was to say yes to every single thing that happened. Furthermore, it's strange that love is a command. Love we usually think of as a feeling, right? Something that doesn't easily respond to us, that just happens to us one way or another. How can feelings be commanded? What is the commitment here? Understanding this claim, we're supposed to love our fate, it seems kind of ridiculous. All right, well, let me change topics a little bit, and I think we can get back to show you what this might mean. Let's talk about New Year's resolutions. I noticed something this year. I was sort of paying attention to social media as New Year came and went, and as the holidays came and went. And what I noticed was not very much. Didn't see many people making New Year's resolutions or talking much about the year in review or the year behind them. It seems like New Year's resolutions were out of fashion. I saw many people actually saying they weren't going to do it, that they were rejecting it altogether. And I can understand why. Right? New Year's resolutions are often superficial, right? That people, do it for a week, for 2 weeks, for 3 weeks. Maybe they get through January with their new exercise routine, or they're temporarily giving up drinking, or whatever it is that they've decided they're going to do. But not many people keep it up. They can be really superficial in the things that people want to change, right? They may have no deep ideas about it. So I can understand how we might want to say, no New Year's resolutions, to reject them. This year, though, I think they might be more necessary than ever. Which brings me to my next change of topics. That is distraction. Our attention and our attention span is under a sustained assault. We have, with social media, with our phones, with our computers, with lots of different things that we interact with, deliberate efforts to hack our attention, to grab our attention one way or another. So cleverly designed artificial intelligence programs are designed to try to keep pulling us away into some little tidbit that they want us to pay attention to. They're poking us every so often to push us to think about this or think about that. And every time they do it, right, they give you something that you like, some little piece of dopamine, right, some little piece of something that makes you smile or makes you angry or makes you something, right, that makes it worthwhile, that gets you there. But what it's also doing is creating a habit of being distracted. It's creating a habit of giving in every time you get a little bit bored and saying, well, let's see if I can find some kind of dopamine. Let's flip something here. Working from home, working online, working all hours. It's become an expectation that we're always on, right? That we're responsive, that we respond to emails within minutes, that people can reach us anywhere, that the work hours are not just the work hours. So we're always splitting our attention, trying to pay attention to driving as well as what people are saying, trying to pay attention to our family or to the meal that we're having, while popping in and out with text messages to somebody else, carrying on 2 conversations at once. We're split. I think what's interesting about this is that it does create sorts of pleasurable moments. People like to get messages. That feels good. That's why you check. That's why you want to look at it. People like to get little tidbits of gossip or information, or to discover an interesting news story. So that's why you keep checking. You get these little minutes of dopamine, little doses of dopamine. But it leads to a particular kind of unhappiness. This lack of focus leads to burnout. It leads to a kind of dissatisfaction. All of those little pleasurable moments that come together, at the end of the day, they don't amount to anything. There's nothing holding them together. There's nothing that organizes them, that brings them into something larger than just a bunch of scattered little moments. You can't even remember all the little things you looked at, and if you can't hold them together. All these little moments of happiness, right, leave us disaffected, burnt out, unable to find pleasure in a lot of ordinary things. It's not the same kind of pain, right, or the same kind of unhappiness that comes with losing love or losing a job or losing some kind of piece of your identity that you've been thrown into. That is a very serious pain as well. But that is a pain that means something, right? That is a pain that comes from the significance of those relationships or those jobs or what you had worked for to build up that component of your identity. That is a pain that is a love of your fate, right? That is a pain that comes from your attachment, from grieving a fate that you won't have anymore, a part of you that won't be there anymore. Now, that is a deep and hurtful pain, absolutely, but it is much more meaningful than the kind of burnout that I think so many of us are dealing with. So this unhappiness, right, the unhappiness that comes from this distraction, is a refusal to love. It is a refusal to attach. It is a refusal to make something mean something, right? Burnout takes the meaning out of every activity. It makes it into momentary pleasures. That's all we can have, right? We just need to indulge in those. And that, in the end, is far worse. So this is what will bring me back to resolutions. Establishing commitments, goals, and directions are going to be our way out of this. If we think about what it means to practice something, right? If you want to practice something, if you're trying to play piano, you've got to practice doing it, or you're trying to learn a new language, you've got to practice doing it, or you're trying to solve math problems, you've got to practice doing it. It's doing the activity, but it's also paying attention to it in a particular way. You're watching how you're doing it. You're paying attention to what you're thinking as you do it, to what you're feeling as you're doing it, as you're trying to solve the problem, where you're trying to go, and not necessarily all of your attention on the results. Yes, if you're trying to work the math problem, you're practicing working math problems, you are trying to get the answer. But if you're practicing, you're not just trying to get the answer and forget it. You're paying attention to how you got there. What was it that you did that made this work? How did you feel? How were you processing it? How were you engaging the whole problem? How were you focused? It's that larger goal that helps pull us through this. It's that commitment, right, that helps us think about all of our activities and pay attention to them in the right way and connect them up so that they can be meaningful. So setting a New Year's resolution gives us something to practice, right? Saying, I'm going to get better at this or that, right? Setting something that I'm going to do well gives me something to practice. It takes my scattered moments and it puts them into a structure, right? Sometimes the pleasures that I experience are helpful and they're part of that process of me learning more. Sometimes those pleasures are a distraction and I get pulled off paying attention to the wrong things. In this chaos that we're seeing with all of these vulnerabilities, we can find meaning in our restrictions. That is, we can find meaning in the goals that we set and the ways that we restrict ourselves in order to pursue those goals. Rather than looking at whatever might entertain us for a moment, right? We look at what we will need in the longer term to achieve this. We can pay attention to how we try. What we do each day can be moving us closer to the goal, or at least be practice, right? Something that we can pay attention to, even when it goes badly, at least it's practice. We can find meaning in our failures if we're striving to get better. It makes sense. It has a value, even if it hurts, even if it's a loss, even if it's sad. It has a significance that you don't have when you're just scattered and distracted and vulnerable. So a New Year's resolution, I think, is a rebellion against our vulnerability. It doesn't make it go away. It doesn't make it disappear. We're still going to be vulnerable. All of the things that I talked about at the beginning are still there. But it orders our suffering. It orders our vulnerability. It gives those activities meaning And in that way, it gives us a victory over our vulnerability. We are not just subject to our fate. We can love our fate. We can pay attention to it. We can care about it. We can dive in and say yes to those things that we can do well, that we can control, that we can manage. To say yes to the values and things that are important. Even when they get lost, you can mourn them. And that is a certain love of what has been lost. Last point I want to make, though, because this all sounds very serious and in direction, is something else that these New Year's resolutions can do. Something else this work and this sort of directed activity can do for us is appreciate an Italian concept I was reminded of recently called dolce far niente. What it means is the sweetness of doing nothing. I think that's something too that is valuable. I think we underestimate the sweetness of just sitting and doing nothing. But that's only possible within a life that is often striving and directed and practicing. That is, you can only really enjoy a break if you're also working. We have a tendency to forget that. So I think both. I think you need New Year's resolutions, and I think you need a little dolce far niente. And with that, I will end it.